Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Pulse with BP. I'm your host, Billy Parvatam. Folks, I'm so excited today to be joined by Mr. Dan Dierdorf, NFL Hall of Famer, played with the St. Louis Cardinals his entire career. He's also a Hall of Fame broadcaster with Monday Night Football on ABC and CBS, and also a current color analyst for his alma mater, Michigan. Mr. Dierdorf, thank you so much for joining me today.
Billy, I'm pleased to join you.
For sure. Well, I want to start off with first, how have you been handling this pandemic? I mean, this is something that has impacted our lives both professionally and personally this last year plus. So how have you been handling this last year?
Well, I think responsibly. It's I'm in the age bracket where I was my wife and I were both very concerned about being careful and wearing masks and in the beginning limiting our contact with our grandchildren and whatnot. But I was fortunate. We both got vaccinated in January and got our second Pfizer shot in February. So I've been very fortunate in that regard. It's amazing once you get vaccinated, the tension level drops considerably.
Well, obviously that's great to hear. And I want to talk about your NFL Hall of Fame career. I mean, you are one of the select few that have a gold jacket. You played with the Cardinals when they were in St. Louis as an offensive lineman from 1971 to 1983. I was just curious, what are some of your favorite memories as a player?
Well, it was, growing up, I grew up in Canton, Ohio, only a mile from the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So obviously football is a large part of the culture of especially Northeastern Ohio. And so, I playing high school football and let's not kid ourselves, being a jockey was not in the future for me. I was a big kid. I'm a big guy. And so obviously football was a sport. Although in high school, I wrestled. I went to the state championship as a wrestler. I did track and field. I could have gone to college on a track scholarship. I was a good shot putter and a discus thrower. So I enjoyed doing all of that, but football was my first love. And growing up in Canton, it's 2 hours to Columbus and 3 hours to Ann Arbor. So it's not really a stretch to head to Southern Michigan and Ann Arbor.
And, what was your week-to-week preparation leading up to a game? I mean, I'm curious because as football players in the NFL, I mean, there's so much that goes on from Sunday to Sunday. What was your week leading up to the game from after a game finished on Sunday to the next game on the following Sunday?
Well, it was you enjoyed what happened or you didn't. One or the other on Sunday night, and you did your best to cycle your way through that because Monday morning it was back to work. When I first started playing in the league, we always had Mondays off. And then during my career, coaches all across the league determined that, hey, you're better off coming in on Monday, working some of that soreness out of your body, and then taking Tuesday off. So we would come in Wednesday, get the game plan for what we were going to how we were going to attack the team we were playing, which plays we were going to emphasize. And then, every day during practice, every snap is filmed and you watch it the next day. Thursday morning, we would watch what we did on Wednesday. And the coaches did a good job of trying to put you in the situations where, on the 20-yard line, we were going to do this. Well, it's a lot easier to execute it on Sunday if you did it on the practice field on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So it was a gradual buildup. The football is very much a cycle. I don't know what it's like to play baseball or, where you play 5 games a week or something. Football has a natural progression to it, a natural buildup where every day gets a little more serious. And by Saturday, nobody's smiling very much. You're starting to get your business suit on and get ready to do some serious work.
For sure. And how underappreciated do you think the position of offensive lineman is? I mean, as a Hall of Famer yourself, you know you were right in the meat of those battles on the lines. And even today, when it's all the talk about the offenses and the quarterbacks, it really does feel like you've got to have a solid offensive line to win the Super Bowl and win a lot of games. I mean, how important and how underappreciated do you think the offensive line position is?
Well, I think it's come a long way. I don't think there's any question that when in the 60s and the 70s, offensive line play was not, I don't think it was really a point of emphasis for the general fan. And then, as more and more games were televised, as the analysts became better, and I'll give John Madden a lot of credit for that in terms of educating the consumer, so to speak, on some of the intricacies of playing on the offensive line. And I think that the fan today and their knowledge of the game and their appreciation of, let's just take offensive line play is so much greater than it was 30 or 40 years ago. And for all of us old offensive linemen, that's very welcome.
And you are a St. Louis Cardinal through and through. I mean, you played there your entire career. I was curious to get your take on this. I mean, St. Louis has lost an NFL team now twice with the Cardinals and the Rams. It really seems like it's one of
That's not very good. That's not very good, is it?
Yeah, for sure. Well,
Yeah,
I was curious
we're
because
two-time losers.
St. Louis is probably one of the only cities in America where really the NFL team, you could argue when it's there, is the third most popular team after the Cardinals and the Blues. Do you think St. Louis would get another NFL team? And I guess as a guy who played there, how do you describe their NFL fan base?
Well, all right, let me just say, yeah, in St. Louis, everybody goes, well, this is a baseball town. Yeah, there's no question. We have a historic baseball franchise, okay, that's on a par with the Dodgers and in terms of, how many championships they've won and all. And that devotion to the baseball Cardinals runs very deep. Yeah, we were a football team in this town, and not only were we competing with, but we had the same name. So they were the baseball Cardinals, we were the football Cardinals, and so in that regard, it was a challenge. But we had a great fan base, we really did, and we provided a good product. We had a lot of good players. We were competitive. We were in the NFC East at the time, which means that every year Dallas came to town, the Redskins came to town. Back then, the Eagles and the Giants came, but nobody cared. They were awful. But we were a good football town. And I feel bad for the citizens of St. Louis. We probably, as a region, mismanaged the Cardinals. The Cardinals should still be here. And there was a reluctance to build the Cardinals a new stadium. There's nothing anyone could have done in this town to keep the Rams here. Stan Kroenke wanted to take the Rams to Los Angeles, and he was going to do it. He did it.
And, obviously you played a Hall of Fame career in the NFL. You got the gold jacket. I was wondering what inspired this transition to broadcasting?
Well, when I was still an active player with the Cardinals, I went to work at a radio station here in St. Louis, a very prominent radio station, KMOX, where Jack Buck worked, Bob Costas worked. It was, they were the broadcast home of the baseball Cardinals, the football, the Blues. They were everything. And I actually got a chance I worked there, on-air work, for the last 5 or 6 years of my playing career. I was very fortunate in that regard. And so when I retired, I immediately went to work at the radio station, and I was very fortunate that CBS knew I was there and immediately hired me, and I started doing. In 2 years, I was CBS's number 2 analyst behind John Madden. And after only 2 years at CBS, I got hired by ABC to do Monday night. So it was a pretty fast rise.
For sure. And you reached the pinnacle of sports broadcasting, calling 3 Super Bowls. I wanted to go to through each one of them one by one. Your first Super Bowl was the Redskins and the Broncos with John Elway, and Doug Williams makes history in that game, becoming the
Right.
first African-American quarterback to win a Super Bowl. What do you remember about that first Super Bowl you broadcast?
Well, what I remember was that, yes, we all knew that because Doug Williams being the starting quarterback for the Redskins, how historical that was. It was fun for me because the head coach of the Redskins was Joe Gibbs, who was a coach of mine in St. Louis for 5 years when I played for the Cardinals. He was an assistant on Don Coryell's staff before he became the head coach at Washington. So now the what was tough for us was Washington was a big favorite in that game, and everybody thinks announcers are biased. We don't care who wins or who loses. All we want is a close game. That's all we want. So Denver was a big underdog, and they jump out to a 10-0 lead, and we are thrilled. I mean, we to go to a commercial break, and we're giddy because Denver's going to give them a game. And then guess what? Washington scores 35 points before halftime, and the route is on. And that's all you want in a Super Bowl. You want a good game. But yes, it was enjoyable to be a part of what that meant to the NFL with Doug Williams.
And then that second Super Bowl, I mean, you might have called one of the greatest Super Bowls of all time when you consider everything, the Whitney Houston national anthem. You had Scott Norwood missing that field goal at the end. And if I'm not mistaken, I mean, that Super Bowl was played on the onset of the Gulf War. So I think I read that you guys were kind of worried or had taken protocols if maybe there was a terrorist attack or something happened during the game.
Well, it was, yes, it was. And first of all, the game was spectacular. It was the first Super Bowl that came down to the last play of the game, that win or lose. But yes, the Gulf War was on. Security, it was the first time the fans in attendance there in Tampa had to go through metal detectors and security to get in. They closed the airspace around the stadium. There was no blimp flying around. The only thing in the air was a Black Hawk helicopter with gunmen in it circling the stadium. Security was very tight, and yeah, there was people were a little apprehensive. But yes, the Whitney Houston little known fact was she'd actually recorded that. She didn't sing that live. That was and the only reason I know that is we were there rehearsing on Saturday, and it came out of and we all went, wow, are you listening to this? And all the anthems are recorded at those. You can't afford a malfunction of somebody tripping over a wire and unplugging a microphone. I mean, you can understand that, but yeah, that was historical in and of itself.
And then that last Super Bowl you broadcast, unfortunately, another blowout, but you get to see Steve Young kind of leap out of the shadow of his predecessor, Joe Montana, and lead the 49ers to their 5th Super Bowl victory. What do you remember about that last Super Bowl you broadcast?
Well, it was that I ran out of fingers to count Steve Young's touchdown passes. That's, yeah, we knew how good the 49ers were. They were talented on both sides of the ball, and they just routed the Chargers. That was unfortunately typical of a fair number of Super Bowls, that no matter how much you might hope and wish and pray that the underdog can mount a good, make a good game of it, it just didn't happen. It was San Francisco from beginning to end. I think Steve Young had 6 touchdown passes, a Super Bowl record, and it looked like he and Jerry Rice were like, they were just out there playing catch, and nobody from San Diego could do anything about it.
And as you reflect on kind of your Monday night tenure, I mean, Monday Night Football back in those days was kind of the premier game for the NFL, and you worked with Al Michaels and the late Frank Gifford for 12 seasons, which is almost unheard
Right.
of, really feels like these days. I mean, as
Yes.
you reflect on your Monday night tenure, what do you want people to remember about your time there?
Well, I did Monday Night Football when it was still Monday Night Football, and when I say that, it I wasn't part of the decision. I don't agree with it, but the NFL's decision to make Sunday Night Football the primary game, get the best games. When we were doing Monday Night Football, that was Monday night. I mean, Monday night we had we had great schedules. By and large, it was the focus. I like to say to people, I was so proud. I did Monday Night Football when it was still Monday Night Football, and it was still appointment television, and I never took it for granted that standing next to Frank Gifford and standing next to Al Michaels, that for those 12 years I was a part of television sports history.
For sure. And so you were there for 12 years. What made you decide to eventually move on and work with CBS?
Well, ABC, we were bought by ESPN basically, and ESPN management came in to take over Monday night. And when new management comes in, they want to put their own stamp on it. They want to change things around. And so Frank was the first to go. And then when my contract expired, they made it pretty clear to me that maybe I ought to move on. And that's exactly what I did. And that, quite frankly, then Monday Night Football went through the Dennis Miller, Tony Kornheiser. I had nothing to do with any of that.
Well, then you end up going to CBS, and you still have a pretty successful run there. Worked with Greg Gumbel for many years. I was wondering, what do you remember about the Ravens-Broncos game? I mean, that game for some reason really stuck out in my mind with your broadcasting tenure there. You had Ray Lewis's final run. Joe Flacco throws that 70-yard
Right.
mile-high miracle. Ravens end up winning that game in double overtime. What do you remember about that game?
Well, I know that we're supposed to be macho, tough guy. It was about it was single digits there in Denver, and we are frozen. I mean, we are. It actually, I'm having trouble getting words to come out succinctly because seriously, I'm so cold that and I remember looking at the clock, going, "Wow, this thing's going to be over in a minute." And when it's over, I can't wait because on the other side of that door is warm air. And then of course, the Flacco pass, and it ends up going to overtime. And on the one hand, you're thrilled because to be doing a playoff game that goes to overtime is an announcer's dream. But it was bittersweet because I'd never been that cold in my life. So it was. But yes, that was quite a defensive gaffe there on the part of Denver to give up that big play.
You broadcast in the NFL for so many years. I was curious, what were some of your favorite stadiums to travel to, whether it was to actually call the game with the great view or just to have a chance to travel the city and see the sights after a game?
Well, everybody loves to be a part of a football environment that maybe is a little different and a little, a couple of places come to mind. I always loved going to Pittsburgh. 5 minutes before the game, when the crowd is waving the terrible towels, and there's an energy at the old Three Rivers Stadium and now Heinz Field that just it's hard to replicate. Probably my favorite environment in all of the National Football League was Arrowhead Field in Kansas City. And in the regard of that, it's the closest thing in the NFL to what I would call a college atmosphere. Every single person in the stadium is wearing red. The way the stadium was laid out there, they have hundreds of acres of parking it's the best tailgate experience because it's all right there. And you drive in 3 hours before the game. It is the best smelling parking lot in America. There are people, they've got crystal candelabra. They've got pig roasts going on. They've got, I mean, they've got it down to, so, I always loved going to Kansas City just because it was almost like being in Ann Arbor or Columbus or any other major college town, Blacksburg, take your pick.
And so you had another successful run at CBS, but you kind of decided to, step away from the NFL broadcast and eventually come back to your alma mater and work the color games for Michigan with your former teammate Jim Brandstatter. What kind of factored into that decision?
Well, I retired from CBS because I came from the generation where we practiced every day on AstroTurf, played on AstroTurf, and we just got ground to dust. I mean, I've got 2 artificial knees, 2 artificial hips, back surgeries. So it had become increasingly difficult for me to get around and navigate my way through airports. I just got tired of it. And so when I retired from CBS after the 2013 season, I had no intention of ever walking in a broadcast booth ever again. And then I get a call from my alma mater, and they begged me to do it. And it's so much easier than doing TV. First of all, I can drive to the games. I've got a summer home up in Michigan. It's very convenient. Plus, when I'm at Michigan Stadium, I got a golf cart and a driver, and I tailgate with all my. But I'll say it's the best thing I ever did, because 43 consecutive years, I was in an NFL stadium every Sunday. 13 as a player, 30 years as a network broadcaster. I had forgotten how much fun and how enjoyable it is to be on a college campus on a Saturday afternoon. It's different. It's just different than the NFL. The band, the tailgates, and to be back at my alma mater and to be up in the booth with a guy that I've known my entire life. I mean, Jim and I were teammates. We played the same position. He was my backup, but I've known Jim Brandstatter since I was 19 years old and he was 18 years old. And so the combination of both has been a lot of fun. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, but it's got a shelf life too. This probably my last year doing it.
Wow. And speaking of which, I mean, you played at Michigan. I mean, you're a Michigan guy through and through. How do you describe the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry? I mean, it's one of the best rivalries in the country, I have to imagine.
Well, as of right now, we're not holding up our end of the bargain in terms. You're being lately. You're being very generous calling it a rivalry. It is, to play Ohio State is the reason you went to Michigan. To play Michigan is the reason you went to Ohio State. It's a fantastic experience. Ohio State right now is on a historic run. You got to give them a lot of credit. They're recruiting. I give them all the credit in the world. I don't like it, but I give them all the credit in the world. But I'm from Ohio, but I went to Michigan, but I give Ohio State credit for where they are right now. But it's an extraordinary rivalry.
But Mr. Dierdorf, do you think there's a problem in college football with parity? I mean, I think what's so great about the NFL, it really does seem like for the last handful of years, any team has kind of been in the picture to win the Super Bowl. But with the college football playoff, it seems like there's a few teams like Clemson, like Ohio State, like Alabama that are in the picture. And then you've got a lot of schools like Michigan and Virginia Tech on the outside looking in. I mean, do you think parity is a problem in college football, or is there anything we can do to solve it?
Well, the problem is that there's parity for everybody except those top 3 teams. That's the problem. And the NFL has ways of dealing with that. When you win it all, every other team drafts a player before you get a chance to draft a player. That there's a salary cap that keeps you from accumulating too much talent. Well, there are no such things in college football. And yes, I think right now with the playoff system, where there's going to be 4 teams that ultimately make that playoff system, I think it hurts the sport when you can write in 3 of those in June, or if you want to, we could do it today. I mean, seriously, what are the odds that Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama are going to be 3 of the 4 teams? And that's, to me, you can't legislate. You can't say to Nick Saban, okay, Nick, here's the deal. You only get to sign 4 5-star players this year. That's not the way college football works. So let's face it, these teams right now they're showing everybody else how to get it done. And where a lot of high school kids now make a decision on where they're going to go to college based solely on, is that the best place to get me ready for the NFL? That's why they're successful. Used to be you went to college for a different reason than that. Like, I think you can say that, can't you?
For sure. And I'm curious, Mr. Dierdorf, because you played in the NFL in the 70s and the 80s. Are you ever jealous of the players today and the lifestyle that they live? I mean, it seems like now they're able to market themselves a lot better with social media, and just overall the players are making more money. Or, all being said, that's not something you really consider too much?
Well, hey, first of all, the money the players are making today is extraordinary. And the reality is they deserve every penny of it. That they do. What is professional football except the players? It's, no offense to Jerry Jones, but nobody goes to Texas Stadium to watch Jerry Jones do anything. They're there to watch Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott and the Dallas Cowboys. So in my mind, the players deserve all the money. Now, do I wish that I would have played today? Yes. I'd be making $15 million a year playing tackle now. And trust me, I did not make $15 million. So the reality is, I'm happy for today's players. They deserve the money, but it has really exploded. It has. In just a couple generations, it's astonishing the money the players make today versus when I played. Yeah, I can tell you a high-paid player in the 70s was making $50,000.
I'm curious, this might be a blasphemous question, but would you ever trade your Hall of Fame playing career for a Super Bowl ring, or is that something you're pretty happy with, where you're at, being one of the few that has a jacket?
I would have loved to have gotten a Super Bowl ring, but there are a lot of punters out there that have Super Bowl rings. And there are a lot of guys who were backups and who didn't even get in the Super Bowl, and they have a Super Bowl ring. There aren't very many people that are in the Hall of Fame. In my mind, there's no comparison.
For sure. And Mr. Dierdorf, you've been so gracious with your time. I have 2 final questions for you. My first one is, I was curious, how much less of a time commitment, if it is broadcasting compared to playing? I mean, you broadcast at the highest levels, and for a high-profile college football program, you've played an NFL Hall of Fame career. What's the difference in terms of time commitment between the two?
Well, broadcasting, I always viewed it as it's a current events class. You just have to, every day, you got to take a couple hours and the internet, in the old days, and man, I'm going to date myself, but you used to get newspaper articles sent to you. I'd get a FedEx package every day from New York, from CBS or ABC, they were copies of newspaper articles from around the country. And that was fantastic. Well, now you just sit in front of your computer and you can, if you've got New England playing Tampa, you can spend all week reading the Tampa newspapers, all the New England. You can gather all this information. Certainly, being a don't let anybody tell you that being a broadcaster is harder than being a player. No, there's no comparison. And again, there's also when you work for a network and you are calling games, you call the same team a lot of the times. When you're one of the upper broadcast crews for a network, you don't call games with bad teams. So there's there are, when the season's over and you've done 18 games or whatever, you look back on it, at least half the teams in the league, you never saw them at all. So yeah, it's a lot easier in that regard.
Mr. Dierdorf, my final question for you is, as you reflect on your career and your life, both playing and broadcasting, are you pretty content with how it's played out? I mean, you were an NFL Hall of Fame player, played your whole career with the St. Louis Cardinals. You broadcast 3 Super Bowls, Monday Night Football on ABC, and you also worked with CBS. Now you're working for your alma mater here, wrapping that up soon. I mean, as you reflect on your career, are you pretty happy with how everything's played out? Is there a regret, something you wish you could have done? Or all being said, just happy with how everything has happened so far?
I've led an extraordinary life. It would be incredibly selfish of me to look back and say, boy, I wish this or wish that. I'll just, to be completely honest, yeah, I'm just sorry I never played on a championship team in the NFL. That would have been fun to have done that. Not just for myself, but for my teammates to have experienced all of that. But no, when I look back at what I've been able to do, who I've been able to share a broadcast booth with, legends, all the way from the beginning to the end, I've led an extraordinary life. I couldn't be happier.
Mr. Dierdorf, this has been such a pleasure getting to talk to you about your wonderful career, all the great insights and stories you've had. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate talking with you.
Billy, I enjoyed it. You were well prepared, and kudos to you. Good job.
Thank you so much to Mr. Dan Dierdorf, a legendary NFL Hall of Famer with the St. Louis Cardinals, as well as a Hall of Fame broadcaster, for joining me on the latest edition of The Post with BP. Thanks so much to everybody for joining us. I'm Billy Parvatam. We'll see you next time.